Hello everybody, infomercial here. It's spring where I live, and I have allergies. And I live in one of the worst places in the entire world if you have allergies to things like grass seed, or if you get hay fever or something like that. That doesn't have anything to do with Elden Ring invasions, which is what you're watching here. But that's just to say, if I'm sniffly, if you can hear a little bit of gunk in my voice, that's what's going on. There's a train in the background. I live right next to some train tracks. I live on the wrong side of the tracks. That's a lie. I live in a normal neighborhood. These are invasions, lightning guy invasions. Level 80. We're at level 80. This is a faith build. And this is a build actually that I featured in some earlier videos, the Black Flame Servant, the Udun Zealot build. Took them up to level 80 from level 60, and I started using the Dragon Cult incantations and the Gravelstone Seal. And this build has a lot of really fun things on it. I've been enjoying it a lot. I'm trying to make kind of a variety of different builds and eventually bring them up to around between 120 and 160 for the DLC, just so that I can, try out everything that is in the DLC and also do a bunch of different invasions and get a bunch of different flavors of invasions in the DLC. So this is one of the guys that we're going to be doing the DLC with. But one thing that I do really like about faith builds, and I had never actually, I've put in hundreds of hours into this game, and I have never actually made a faith build before. I don't know why, but just wasn't something that I had ever done. But especially when it comes to PvP, faith builds give you a lot of options against passive players. And that is something that you will see if you do invasions. You're going to run into people who just don't want to fight you. They just kind of hole up somewhere. They don't want to come out and face you head on. It's basically the host and, two of their buddies just sort of sitting in a room with no enemies in it, and there's only one way in and one way out. And they are just waiting for you to walk into a meat grinder, essentially. And they're trying to see if they can wait you out. That's kind of the game that you play in invasions sometimes. It's about patience. Are you the type of person who is just going to rush in because you're impatient, or are you willing to be a little bit petty? You got to be a little bit petty if you want to be a good invader. And are you willing to just wait people out? Or a third option is to have something on your build to deal with that. And classic ways of dealing with passive hosts and co-opers would be things like the jar cannon, the hand ballista, any kind of ranged attack. Night Maiden's Mist is a spell that is especially good for people who are doing that exact tactic, right? They're in a room with one entrance and all their buddies, and they're just saying, hey, come on in and fight me, because I'm not going to come out there and play through the level and fight you. But another, option that you could have is making a build around things like the Dragon Cult incantations, because you have so many different options if you have a faith build for ways to deal damage to players who otherwise are just sort of, off in their own little corner and they don't want to engage. Because these incantations have huge areas of effect. That's kind of what the Dragon Cult incantations are all about. You have like the Lightning Spear, you have Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, Lanciax's Glaive, things like that. These all do kind of initial damage if they make contact, but then they sort of spread out across the ground in an area of effect. And also, if you have a faith build, you have access to what I think is still kind of a busted weapon, which is the Black Knife. That Ash of War that it has, Blade of Death, is so good at roll catching. It's good at catching retreating players. It's good at catching passive players. It does a lot more damage than I think a lot of people anticipate. And I'm thinking one of the reasons for that might be because it does holy damage. And holy damage is kind of, it's kind of a joke in PvE. Like, at the end of the game, that final stretch of bosses that you have from really like Malekith onwards, and maybe even like Godskin Duo too, but certainly from Malekith onwards, all of those bosses have really, really high holy damage resistance. And, you know, it kind of makes sense lore-wise, right? Like, Godfrey obviously wouldn't be very damaged by holy damage. The Elden Beast does holy damage. It is like the source of holy damage. It is the Elden Ring. And so, yeah, of course you're not going to be able to like damage it that much. And so I think a lot of people sort of abandon holy damage around mid-game. They start using lightning or fire, which is much more effective. But I also think that there aren't a whole lot of armor sets in the game that protect you against holy damage. Because, I mean, look at that, right? Like, this is doing upwards of, you know, 600, possibly 700 damage on impact with these guys. And these guys are probably, I don't know, they could be anywhere from level 80 up to like level 100. And so Blade of Death in PvP and holy damage in PvP is actually a lot more effective than holy damage in PvE. So these spells, yeah, they give you a lot of opportunities to deal with passive players, but they are also helpful in situations where you are getting rushed down by co-opers, because, you know, like they have this big area of effect, they have really big hitboxes, they're not like, you know, specifically targeted spells. You don't really need to be locked on to do damage with these. You can just kind of let them rip. And I think that's one of the main differences between spells and incantations in this game, is that it feels like for the most part, spells are kind of like single target. And, you know, there's exceptions to the rule. But spells are great at single target damage. Incantations have those big hitboxes, those big areas of effect. And so that lends itself pretty well to a PvP type of situation. And all of these actually are incantations that you can get fairly early on in the game. So like just the basic lightning spear. I don't know what it's called in Elden Ring. It's not called lightning spear. It's probably called something else. But you know, the Solaire spell, the one they've had ever since like Dark Souls 1, that is, I find, actually kind of slept on. Again, another one of those like underrated incantations, because you can charge it, so that means you can mix up how long it takes to cast it, so that can throw people off potentially, make it a little bit easier to roll catch. I find that comboing lightning spear with other things that people tend to roll away from is usually pretty effective. So especially after like a backstab or a parry and a riposte, people, like, they don't really tend to swing out of hit stun that much in Elden Ring, because there's just so many really quick ways to do damage. Sort of the default reaction to getting parried or getting backstabbed or getting even just like knocked flat is people like roll away from you. They don't tend to just like start swinging afterwards. So if they're rolling away, that gives you a lot of different things that you can do, and that lightning spear is one of them that can be really effective, because it comes out fast, right? We're also have the Radagon's icon equipped, and eventually I want to bring this up to 40 dex for that maximum cast speed, but also because that's when you can use the Bolt of Grand Sax, which I guess it makes sense that that's like a high dex weapon. There's part of me that wishes the dex requirement wasn't so high for that, so that I could use it at lower levels without kind of losing the without losing some of these other incantations that I'm doing, because that would mean, at least, you know, at level 80 you kind of have to sacrifice and make more of a dex build than a faith build, which is what I have going on here. But anyways, yeah, we've got we've got some points into dexterity, both to wield some of the weapons that we have here, but then also just to make sure that those incantations can come out quick. And that's kind of the key with a Faith build, is because you have some that you can charge, like Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike. That can really do lots of damage if you fully charge it and kind of catch people off guard. You can hide around a corner and do that. That's pretty effective. But you also have things like Catch Flame. Catch Flame, one of those incantations that you get at the very beginning of the game that can still be incredibly effective and scales super well with your Faith level, super well with the upgrade level of that talisman, whatever it is that you're rocking. And that, with maximum cast speed, comes out super fast. Super quick incantation, does plenty of damage, and eats through shields like crazy. Because people love their great shields. They love their great shields in Elden Ring. They love the fingerprint shields. They love, whatever the version of like the Tower Knight shield is in this one. Just kind of hiding behind it and sort of daring you to attack them. Well, something like Catch Flame can be pretty effective at that. Or you can also use a Scythe. I don't know if I really like the Scythe yet in PvP. I'm mainly using this because I made a real edgy build, like on I think it was maybe my first playthrough of the game, where I was dual wielding scythes, and one of them had frostbite and one of them had fire damage. And I might remake that build, who knows. Anyways, thanks for watching.